Good evening, everyone. I can see Miss Deborah is on the call. Good evening, ma'am. Monica, good
Good
evening.
evening. Not a ma, but thank you. Good evening.
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, Otitson Nijesu David. Thank you very much for joining early. We've gone live on the call, so we just have to start talking. Welcome to the week 3 of JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program. My name is Hussein Mahadi, and I'm the moderator for today's session on entertainment business law. And our very interesting topic for today is fashion business and law. We have two mentors. Deborah is on the call, and we'll be expecting Benis Aseng on the call too. And those are our two mentors for today. We are also expecting our mentees to join the call. This is 5:59 from where I am. And we'll kickstart immediately. It's 6 p.m. Okay, it's 6, and welcome once again to everyone. I can see we are still not increasing. Our attendance is still not increasing, so I believe everyone will still be joining. I'll make a few announcements on the group chat. Once again, my name is Hussein Mahadi, and good evening to everyone. I'll be making a few announcements before we jump into the main program for today, the main topic discussion for today. And I'll be sharing my screen immediately. Okay, for those of us joining us for the first time about JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program, JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program is a quarterly program for students and young professionals across Africa. Our mentees are afforded the opportunity to access valuable advice, training, network, mentorship, internship, discussion forum, industry updates, and resource materials from experienced mentors. The program seeks to encourage continuous training, development, and evolution in Nigeria, Africa, and around the world. You can watch some of our videos on our social media platforms like YouTube and LinkedIn by just searching for JIIPC or hashtag JIIPCC Some of the objectives of the program are: one, to provide easy access, guidance, training, and resource material for students and young professionals in this course; to facilitate dialogue and network among experienced and less experienced practitioners and stakeholders; to transform mentees into mentors and leaders for the next generation; and to facilitate further mentorship, internship, scholarship, and job placements for our mentees. These are some of our objectives and also about JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program. I'll also be making another announcement that there is currently a 30-minute one-on-one private mentorship session going on. This is an opportunity that JIIPCC affords to all its mentees. On this 30 minutes, of course, the 30 minutes is just an acronym. When you're having a one-on-one session, we all know it takes more than 30 minutes. So you just register by using the link on your screen or sending a message to any of the JIIPCC admin. You get a link to register for the session with your favorite mentor. On these sessions, you can get hacks, secret live lessons, and direction from your favorite mentor. Kindly make sure you take advantage of that. And registration for the next quarter of JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program is still currently ongoing, and the courses that JIIPCC has is intellectual property, artificial intelligence and technology, the energy industry, fintech industry, health tech and law, patent drafting, blockchain, NFTs, and the metaverse, data protection and privacy, and finally, entertainment, business, and law. Kindly do all to share the flyers with your colleagues and friends that are interested in taking any of these courses. So right on, I'll be reading our mentor's profile for today, starting with Miss um, Deborah Opiaifo. Sorry if I didn't pronounce it correctly. So Ms. Deborah is an associate in the corporate commercial department at Templars law firm. She holds a Bachelor of Law from the University of Benin and graduated with first-class honors from the Nigerian Law School. She has garnered experience advising clients across various sectors, including telecommunication, energy, technology, and finance. Areas of expertise include general corporate advisory, intellectual property, media and entertainment law, labor and employment law, company, secretarial and regulatory compliance. Deborah is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria's and the International Trademark Association's Young Practitioners Committee and Outreach Subcommittee. Wonderful profile. Thank you very much for joining us today, Deborah, and we look forward to learning from your vast experience and knowledge on the course. Our second mentor for today is Bernice Ofunre Aseyin. She is the founder of Fashion Law Institute and Cardinal Counsel, a business-oriented law firm with a commitment to innovation and reimaging legal service delivery. She has a passion for fashion and is committed to advancing the development and innovation of the fashion industry in Africa. She is a certified trademark opposition lawyer and holds a certificate in advanced intellectual property valuation from the Intellectual Property Institute of Nigeria. She is also a member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria and an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. She further holds a certificate in tax law from the Chartered Institute of Taxation in Nigeria and is currently undergoing her LLM program at Bangkok University, Nigeria. Another amazing, very amazing profile. Thank you for joining us. If she's already on the call, let me check quickly. Yes, she's already on the call, Ms. Bernice. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we look forward to learning from you and our other mentor. So those are our two mentors for today. I'll be handing the floor to our first mentor, Ms. Deborah, to give us an overview on the topic for today, an introduction also on the topic for today, which is fashion, business, and law. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Deborah. Okay, I think we lost Ms. Deborah. I was not seeing her video, then I can't see her on the call right now. So Ms. Bernice can start as a mentor.
I think she's back now.
Okay. Deborah is back. So Deborah, I was calling on you to give us an overview of the topic for today. For
Hi.
you have like 45 minutes for
Sorry.
max. Yeah.
I'm sure I will need up to 45 minutes. My internet tripped off for a minute.
Okay.
So I think it's stable now. Can I share my screen, please?
Yes,
I
you
have
can.
permission to
Thank
share
you
my
very much.
screen. Yes. Okay.
We can see your screen now.
Can you confirm if you can see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay. Hi, everyone. This is my first time at JIIPC's mentoring session, but I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to meet you as well, Bernice. I feel like you must be really focused on fashion law as opposed to corporate commercial generally. Okay, so I'll be giving a brief overview on fashion law as it relates to fashion. So here's my outline: law and fashion, intellectual property considerations, commercial issues, and question and answer. So I think the first thing we want to look at is law and fashion. Really? How do these two intersect? But the thing is, law intersects with every sector of commerce, right? You think about it, really, we don't necessarily say this law, that law. I mean, some areas have become well known enough that we can say things like entertainment law, sports law, medical law, but there are a lot more areas of industry that law intersects with. In fact, law intersects with everything. We just to everything. So when we took saying fashion law, what we're just talking about is legal issues that affect the business of fashion. And you'll agree with me that law affects every kind of business. And it includes issues such as intellectual property law, of course, consumer protection, franchising, commercial contract, and even employment law, because I mean, the players in the value chain are human beings, right? So why is law relevant to fashion? So I gave a few reasons here. Well, they are not exhaustive. There are many more reasons, but these are just the basics. Firstly, fashion is birthed from creativity, and creativity must be safeguarded to be efficiently monetized. And that statement in itself is probably the bedrock of intellectual property law, is that creatives' works must be protected. If they're not protected and they're just free for everyone to use and abuse, then they won't be monetized, because why pay for something when you can just get it for free or download it from somewhere? Second reason is that it encourages innovation. People are primarily motivated by income or revenue. And if they know that, if my work is protected and I can monetize it, then I'm encouraged to, innovate and bring out new stuff. But if I can't, then there wouldn't be that much of an incentive, to innovate. And the effect of that is that the consumers will have far fewer choices, right? A third reason is for protection and regulation of various players in the value chain. So in the fashion value chain, we have many players: are the designers, who are the creators, there are models, there are consumers, that's the buyers, there are employees, and many more people. And one reason why law is relevant here is it protects each of these people, it sets out their rights and responsibilities and also regulates what they can and can't do. For instance, and this ties into sustainability. There are instances where, I mean, it doesn't happen in Nigeria, but where certain fashion houses will be defending their production process and saying, oh, we don't use, for instance, we don't use children in Bangladesh to produce our items. And that's because law holds them accountable. So that's just an example of law protecting players in the value chain, the employees who produce these things, for instance. And a summary of the relevance of law to fashion is any sector without legal boundaries is likely to slide into chaos. And that's why law intersects with every sector. Case in point, legal gray areas. And I only put surrogacy here because, I mean, Nigeria, but outside Nigeria, of course, it's regulated. But a good example for me is surrogacy in Nigeria. That's a perfect example of a legal gray area. It's not exactly illegal, and it's not exactly legal. So it's just kind of in between. the result of something like that is that it's going to be abused. There are people that are going to be forced into it, doing things that they didn't want to do. And that is the relevance of law to fashion and every sector, to prevent chaos, to prevent anarchy. So first things first, intellectual property considerations. It will be impossible to talk about law and fashion without talking about intellectual property, because intellectual property is the sector of law that really is most relevant to fashion. Of course, there are other areas of law that are relevant, but it's the one that is most relevant. So I'll just quickly go through them, because I know that, or I expect that everyone here is an IP enthusiast. I mean, JIIPCC has IP in its name. So most of this is probably stuff you already know. And I grouped them by the forms of IP that are most relevant to fashion law, right? So normally when people are talking about IP, so they'll start with copyright. I didn't start with copyright because it's not the most relevant to fashion law. The first one is trademarks. Trademarks is arguably the most utilized IP protection measure for fashion brands. And why is that? Well, I think it's because it's the most clear, really. I mean, there's not a lot of argument on, at the very least, people know that I can trademark my brand name. I can trademark my logo. You can even trademark phrases if they're distinct enough. So in Nigeria, I mean, we can say, oh, fashion law in Nigeria is developing and all that, but I can tell you for sure that many of the Nigerian designers, not, of course, not your next door neighbor tailor, but the known Nigerian designers at least, if you do a search at the trademark registry, you'll see that many of them do have their brand names and logos protected, registered at the trademark registry, because trademarks is clear. Everyone knows that, okay, when it comes to trademark, my mark must be distinctive, it should not be deceptive or scandalous or contrary to public morality, and it should not be so identical to an existing trademark as to be likely to deceive the public or cause confusion. So there's a bit more clarity about that, which is why trademarks is the first IP form of choice. So for international laws on this, there's the Paris Convention, and there's the TRIPS Agreement. The TRIPS Agreement is the Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, which is what was signed by all members of the World Trade Organization. And it basically provides for different minimum standards on forms of IP. The Paris Convention also has, its own rules. It provides for national treatment, which is that its member states have signed that, they will not discriminate between foreign brands and the brands of their own nationals. Right of priority registration, which is that if you filed an application in one state, you can file another in another state within a certain amount of time and have it treated like it was filed on the same day it was filed in the first state. Okay, that sounds a bit complex. So let me break that down. So what priority treatment does is that if I filed an application for trademark registration in America and I want to file for registration in Nigeria, because trademark is usually territorial, except for those countries that have formed a bloc. What priority treatment gives me is that if I file within a certain period of time, say 6 months, my application for trademark registration in Nigeria has priority treatment, that is, it is seen as being filed on the same day I filed this in America. So that's an example of what priority treatment is about. And I think one of the most well-known things about the Paris Convention and TRIPS agreements is, the protection about well-known marks that it gives. And well-known marks basically says that, if a trademark is so notorious, like everybody knows it, for instance, Coca-Cola, if you go to another country, even if it's not registered there, it should be afforded protection by virtue of it being a well-known mark. So it's like, I'm a celeb, everybody knows me. So even if I'm not registered in Nigeria, nobody should register, nobody should, touch my mark because everybody knows me. Well, I hate to burst that bubble, but in Nigeria, the concept of well-known marks does not apply because Nigeria has not domesticated the Paris Convention and TRIPS agreements. And if you're in doubt, there is a court case to this effect. Sounds nice, but doesn't apply here for now. So in Nigeria, local laws, we have the Trademarks Act, we have the Trademarks Regulations actually as well, and then we have the Merchandise Marks Act. So in Nigeria, I'm just going to quickly run through the process of the registration procedure, because I know that there are younger lawyers here who it might be useful to. So if a trademark in Nigeria, when you register it, is not valid forever. It's valid for 7 years, renewable for, can renew it for further 14 years. Nigeria is the NICE classification of trademarks. NICE is NICE. And what it basically does is it divides trademarks into goods and services, and then divides them further into classes. For instance, you can have businesses dealing in a certain sector. For instance, clothes can be class 20, for instance. I don't think they're class 20, but that's just an example. It's for the purpose of registration. So when you're registering, you can, you know, and then the registration procedure in Nigeria, after you apply, you get your acknowledgement notice, and then you wait for acceptance notice, which usually takes a few weeks. When you get your acceptance notice, it kind of acts as like a de facto registration, because the full process takes a long time. It can take from a few months to over a year. Then after the acceptance notice, the mark will be published in the trademark journal. The trademark registry periodically publishes the trademark journal. I think it's quarterly now they publish it. When the journal is published, you buy a copy, or you have someone, get a copy for you. Check if your mark is in that journal. Once your mark has been published, you have to wait a period of 2 months. That's the opposition period. That basically is for anybody out there to come and say, oh, wait, no, that person, you shouldn't register that person's mark because I already have a mark, registered similar to that, or for this reason or for that reason. That's the opposition period. After the opposition period, if your mark was not opposed, then you'll be granted a certificate. What happens in the opposition period if your mark is opposed? Well, I'm sure Bernice can speak more to that, but you now have to go through the whole, filing this and filing that, defending yourself, and then the trademark registrar will have to decide. Nigeria also, even though Nigeria didn't domesticate the Paris Convention, Nigeria has foreign priority. So foreign marks registered in a foreign country can be registered in Nigeria through a registration process known as priority claim. And then, what if the brand is not registered? Well, your brand should be registered. I will talk about passing off, but it's advisable for the brand to be registered, right? Passing off is just in the event that for whatever reason you didn't register, but the brand should really be registered. And if you look at it, the trademark registration, I mean, I know you have to get a lawyer or an agent to do it, but it's really affordable. The application fee is like 15K, something negligible, like less than 20K really. So it's and then it doesn't even take up to the 100K that you're paying to the trademark registry outside of agent fees and lawyers fees. So even if you have one small tailor shop and you foresee that this is what you want to be doing, go and register your brand. And then, but in the event that you decide to not protect yourself and leave yourself open, and then someone goes and uses your brand, you have the option of passing off. But passing off is, it's a reactive measure, because it's not a proactive measure, it's reactive, because it's like you were sleeping on your right, now somebody has come to use it, you now suddenly woke up. Well, thankfully, there's passing off, but passing off is it's a common law measure, and passing off it is harder than trademark infringement, because trademark infringement, even if your mark is just one Ikeja brand and nobody really knows, but you've registered it, somebody infringes on it, you can't, you have a right. Well, passing off, you have to prove certain things. You have to prove the existence of goodwill. That is, goodwill is, the rep that your brand already has in the market. People already know my brand, that kind of thing. Then you have to prove that there was a misrepresentation by the defendant, that they're trying to pass off their goods as yours. And then 3, you have to prove that you have suffered a loss or are likely to suffer a loss. And then it will be left to the court to decide if you have sufficiently proved, proved those 3 things. So I think you can see why trademark protection is usually the best. Going further, copyright. So in this context, I know copyright protects a number of other things, but in this context, copyright protects literary and artistic works. So let's say, you know, those, the what do they call them now? The designs, you know, that they use to produce the clothes. You can see that's an artistic work that's protected. But for the purpose of Nigerian law, Nigerian copyright law did not really contemplate fashion items when they were drafting it, because what the Copyright Act says, and even the new act replicates it, is that artistic works which are intended to be used as industrial designs, that is to be replicated through an industrial process, do not qualify for protection. So that's why copyright didn't come first in this presentation, because you can tell that the draftsman did not really contemplate the fashion industry. So we move on to industrial design. Industrial design, we have the Patents and Designs Act, which protects any combinations of lines, color, or both of three-dimensional forms if intended to be multiplied by an industrial process. And that's exactly what, you know, that's exactly what fashion items are. However, for an industrial design to be registrable, it must fit into two major requirements. That is, one, it must be new, and two, must not be contrary to public order or morality. And then on newness, the Act provides that for a design to be deemed new, it must be such that before the date of application for registration as a design, it must not have been made available to the public anywhere and at any time, except you are able to prove to the Registrar of Patents and Designs that the creator of the design could not have known that it had been made available to the public. But this can be a limitation for fashion designers, because typically, once they do a design, they're showing it to the public to create interest. So that's for industrial design. Then I also put counterfeiting here because I wanted to just speak on it briefly, because I know it's, you know, it's a major concern. Counterfeiting basically is, you know, somebody producing like a knockoff of your design, but they're producing like a fake of your work, but they're pretending that it's you. For instance, in fact, this is a problem in fashion law, but I know that from work that I've done that it's also a major problem in FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods. It's a nightmare for them there. For instance, I don't think most Nigerians are aware, but a lot of the products used are actually counterfeited. You won't even know. The soap you use, everything, a lot of it is counterfeited. There's no way you will know. In fact, I was in a meeting with a client once, and they showed me their goods and the counterfeited one, and I couldn't tell the difference. And they now turned it back and now showed one small print somewhere. That was the only difference between the two. How will the normal consumer know? Like, who goes that? Nobody. So all those toothbrushes, different is used. Many of them are fakes, counterfeited, and it's really a nightmare for the producers. So, what's the cure to counterfeiting? Well, in Nigeria, there's no one broad counterfeiting law. We don't have a counterfeiting law in Nigeria. The only law that they wrote counterfeiting law there is, you know, it's the Counterfeit Food and Drugs Act, something like that. But it focuses on food and drugs. You know, because when the legislators are drafting these things, they are kind of thinking of what was the problem we're facing right now. Nobody's thinking of counterfeiting clothes. They were not thinking of it then. You know, they were thinking of fake drugs, fake food items, and whatnot. So we have law on counterfeit food and drugs. We even have law on counterfeit currency, but there's no broad counterfeiting law. So how do we approach anti-counterfeiting in Nigeria? Oh, generally, first, the major thing for fashion designers or anyone really who wants to curtail counterfeiting is vigilance. And that's what the big brands do. They keep an eye out, you know, for anyone who's counterfeiting their products, because it's when you find out that you can do something about it. So how counterfeiting is attacked is with the help of different laws, copyright, trademarks, designs, even customs, so they just use all the laws at the same time. So if they're not going to sue you for trademark infringement, they can sue you for this. They can report to the regulatory agencies that, they're importing counterfeit stuff into Nigeria. And there are two prohibited goods lists that Nigeria has. There's the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCPC, has what it calls an absolutely prohibited product list, which is goods that must not be sold in Nigeria under any circumstance. And the Nigeria Customs Service has an import prohibition list, which is goods that must not be imported into Nigeria, but if already produced in Nigeria, they can be sold. One of these lists, but I think it's the FCPC's absolutely prohibited product list, has clearly counterfeited products. So even if they don't have like a trademark register, they can run to the SCPC or to the customs service and say, this person is selling something on the prohibited products list, that kind of thing. So that's how counterfeiting is attacked in Nigeria. Civil action, criminal action, regulatory intervention, or a combination of all of them. And while not just in Nigeria, but in the world at large, it's not possible to stamp out counterfeiting completely. What you can do is curtail it, and reduce the effect that it has on your brand. Some people argue that, the presence of counterfeits or knockoffs, it's kind of a flattery to the producer. Well, that's for the sake of argument, but it can't be stamped out completely, but it can be curtailed, and the key is what? Vigilance on the side of the regulators, on the side of the creator or the designer. Then I will move quickly to a few commercial issues that I thought we should take note of when it comes to law and fashion. Commercial issues, I will just talk briefly about three. Licensing, distribution agreements. Licensing basically talks about, in simple terms, you giving someone else the right to use your intellectual property, whether that's copyright licensing, but we're talking about fashion law, which will be looking more at trademarks licensing. So you're giving somebody the right to use intellectual property, or you guys have an agreement, for the purpose for which they'll use it. So that is really governed by commercial contracts. So you need to know this, because in fashion, you will really be looking a lot at licensing. Businesses that care about their brands, at least, are very, very careful to whom they license their marks. And if they did not license their marks to you and you went to use it, they will have a problem with it. I just remembered a client that I worked for at one time, and a movie was produced and their brand showed in the movie. And it didn't show by accident. It was like there was a TV somewhere in the movie, and it showed, the way they were reading news and whatnot, and a news item rolled up on the TV, and their brand's name was there. And they lawyered up, and they were like, no, we didn't consent to you including our brand name in this movie, and to take it out. And it was like, small thing, but that it just goes to show you, that's how seriously people take their brands. People that don't take their brand seriously run the risk of having it stolen from them, Distribution agreements, I included this because it's particularly relevant to fashion law. So, for instance, the foreign brands that you like to wear, right? They don't all have offices in Nigeria, but they have distributors, right, that distribute these things for them. So they have distribution agreements with their distributors. And it's important for you as a lawyer to know that, so that when you have that situation with your clients, you're not hearing it for the first time, So that's something that is relevant to fashion law as well. So I won't cite any provision of any law with respect to these two, licensing and distribution agreement, because it's in the realm of commercial contracts. What happens there will be governed by the terms of the contract, subject to the fact that the terms of the contract should not breach any legal provisions enforced. And then next, I'll go on to franchising. For franchising, when you think franchising, think about a brand, fashion or not fashion, that has several stores everywhere. Now, a lot of those brands, they don't all own those stores. They simply have franchising agreements with it can be you or someone that, how do I know? Maybe you can have that kind of money, that you can buy a franchise. It can be you, ordinary people who are willing to comply with, how the brand does these things, and they sign franchising agreements with them that essentially let them open up. So if I have JIIPCC, for instance, you sell the franchise rights, you will see JIIPCC stores everywhere. It doesn't mean that Juliana Imam is the one running each of them. It means that she has had franchising arrangements with the owners of those different stores. So that's and this is for big fashion brands. This is one way that they can increase their reach and expand. It can be in many different countries at the same time and not have direct control over each of those stores. Franchising in Nigeria is not as well. I'm trying to think of a non-negative way to say this, but it's kind of restrictive, right? Especially for foreign franchisors. And in the course of work, most of the time we get inquiries from foreign franchisors wanting to come into Nigeria. Oh, can I, have a franchise agreement with this person or that person? And then you have to advise them that yes, you can, but you need to be aware of certain rules set by NOTAP. In Nigeria, when you're thinking of franchising, the regulatory agency you need to think about is NOTAP. That is the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion. NOTAP has an act, that talks about what franchising is and what kind of transactions come under its purview. So it talks about trademark licensing agreements, franchising agreements. So basically, if a fashion brand wants to franchise, especially a foreign one, I think this applies more to foreign brands actually, they have to comply with the NOTAP rules. And the one that I think is most relevant to them is that NOTAP sets caps for the fees that can be paid to the franchisor. And that's usually what clients are trying to get around. So I don't remember the exact percentages, but NOTAP sets caps. For instance, you can say the franchise fees should not be more than 3.5% of total production. And then another issue for foreign franchisors trying to come into Nigeria is that NOTAP says under franchise agreements, franchise fees can only be made payable from revenue gotten from locally produced products. There's something like that about local content, local production. So it kind of tries to limit local franchisors to say you can't just you do a franchise agreement in Nigeria, then all the goods sold in your store, you bring them from abroad. No, you must also produce some here. And let me just tell you, when you tell a client that, they will just be like, how? Think of a Nike, for instance. That doesn't work for their business model. So either they will just say, what, thanks, but no thanks, bye. Or they would find a way to call it maybe a distribution agreement, and then you have to be a creative lawyer. Or they will just say, what, incorporate a Nigerian entity for us. We'll come and do it by ourselves if they think the Nigerian market is that lucrative. And it is, because Adidas is here now. So, but you should be aware, because you will get inquiries of that nature. Then sustainability concerns. For sustainability concerns, we're basically talking about, people are thinking more of, things like ethical investing, being environmentally friendly. And why does it concern fashion brands? Because they do a lot of manufacturing, producing, they use raw materials, in a lot of cases, chemicals. A lot of what they do can actually harm the environment. So they are required to, well, I wouldn't say there's no particular law, one law in Nigeria that says fashion brands must consider sustainability in. You'll see it inserted in there are different small laws here and there. There's the NESRIA in Nigeria, which is the government agency that deals with environmental standards. And it just says that, it sets standards for manufacturers, people manufacturing in Nigeria, to ensure that, they're disposing waste properly, they're not doing things that are harmful to the environment. So there are little requirements here and there, but apart from even the requirements of the law, investors are beginning to look at it. So people that want to invest in your brand can say, what's your sustainability plan? Or what's your, do you use environmentally friendly materials? And that's why the conversation has grown more and more and more in the last decade. So in the fashion industry, we're looking at what kind of materials are they using, what's their production process? Are they, harming the environment? And even if they're not, are they taking steps to protect the environment? In some offices, for instance, printing, as small as it sounds, is discouraged. Printing of papers. So you might see in some people's email sign-off that think carefully. I've seen an email sign-off that said, think carefully before printing this email. That's a sustainability measure, small things like that. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. But I wanted to also mention that there are many other commercial issues that when advising fashion brands, even up to things like immigration, right? If they are importing things, the things that they're importing, it shouldn't be something on the import prohibition list. It shouldn't be counterfeited, things like that. They'll have to pay import duties. And then the commercial issues that you face would even extend to things like employment law. Any commercial issue you can think of really can apply to fashion brands, especially depending on the size of the brand. The larger the brand, the more refined their operations, the more refined the commercial issues they will face. Things like employment law as well. So, their employees, if they have up to a certain number of employees, the kind of standards that apply. What that means is that if you're going to be a fashion lawyer or a lawyer that advises fashion brands, in addition to other businesses, of course, you should have a good background in general corporate commercial law, because that's where it starts from. A fashion brand is not just going to appear from somewhere and start asking you fashion questions. They might start with things like, we want to come into Nigeria, we want to register, a company. How do we go about that? So the basic corporate commercial law principles, you need to be aware. How to draft commercial contracts, how to review commercial contracts, the kind of terms you should be looking out for, knowing that when you're reviewing a contract, you should have your own client's best interest at heart. Things like that. So general background in corporate commercial law, and then further specialize in fashion law. Thank you all for listening. As I said earlier, I wouldn't need 45 minutes, but I don't know how long I used.
You've used probably 38 to 37 minutes.
Wow, it felt like 10 minutes.
No, I was looking at the time. Thank you very much, Deborah, for that very amazing overview of the topic. Thank you very much for sharing your slides. I also request on behalf of all our mentees on the call that you also share the slides with us, either on JIIPCC email so that we can share it with our mentees, or you can just attach it on the chat box so that everyone can see. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I will send it to the email.
All right. Thank you very much. So we look forward to sending in our questions and also getting amazing answers from you. I'll be calling on our second mentor for today, Ms. Bernice, to give us her own overview of the topic. Thank you very much.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yes, we can hear you.
So I sent my slides over. Are you going to share it? Okay.
We've seen your slides. Okay.
Okay. I wanted to ask if you would share it or I would.
I don't know. I can or you can.
You can help me do that. You can help me do that, actually.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm doing that now.
Yeah, so I would not be talking so much because I honestly think that Deborah has done justice to the foundational issues and other issues that are on the sidelines really I tried so hard not to always go through, thankfully, right, the IP and all those other routes, right, so that I don't have a clash, or we don't have a clash when there are two mentors there. So we're talking about like the same thing, but from different angles. So I will not be talking based on the concept of fashion law. I probably would just be talking as a you want to build your career in fashion rather than, the concept of fashion law. I like to say that in this area of law, while you can be a realistic lawyer, you also have to be what ought to be, because the laws are not there yet. So you have to be thinking the future. You have to be thinking about what is going to be. So I like the fact that the writer talked about what the law is right now, and I'll be talking about what the law is right now, but then from the fashion business standpoint. So one of the issues, or one of the questions I have anytime people reach out to me about fashion law as an area of practice is, a lot of the time people are confused as to whether or not they should choose fashion law as their practice area. The question is always, how do I just focus on fashion? Well, from my slide, I try to talk about one major thing, and that's specialization in law practice. Specialization in law practice can be looked at from different angles, and that is industry specialization and sector specialization. Sector specialization, I mean, sorry. Can you mute your mic? Hello.
Monica was unmuted, but I've muted her now.
Okay.
Thank you. You can continue.
Sorry. So I was saying that specialization in law can be seen from two angles, right? Subject matter specialization and industry specialization. By subject matter specialization, I think that issues like corporate law, property law, environmental law, tax law, IP laws are all subject matter specialization. Why they are subject matter specialization is because you would find them in every industry that you choose to focus on. So I don't know, people are always worried about the fact that if I focus on fashion, I probably would not be an IP lawyer. I probably would not be doing corporate law and stuff. I would probably just be doing apparels and fashion design. But if you would focus on various sectors, you would come across various subject matters. That's my point, right? So there's this subject matter specialization. So industry specialization is you choosing a particular industry that you want to practice as a lawyer. I have chosen fashion as the industry that I want to focus on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I do not come across other subject matters that relate to my field. So in the fashion space, you would find that there is the tax law. I mean, if you're dealing with any client, your client is a business, and there's the tax requirement of every business in Nigeria. So you will have to understand the basic principles of tax laws. There is also corporate law, like Debbie mentioned. You have to understand or have a broad understanding of corporate law, because fashion businesses operate under legal frameworks. They are established by company laws, and you have to have an understanding of that. So sometimes when people talk to me, it's always like, should I focus on corporate law? Should I focus on, tax law and the likes? But I would say that if you would pick an industry, you have to have an understanding of all these subject matters. That's like my point. So there's also the overview of fashion business. Like Debbie mentioned rightly, is there are various players in the fashion business. When you talk about the supply chain, the entire fashion business ecosystem, there are various players, from the farmers, from the people who would manufacture the raw materials, from people who would manufacture the design that will create the design of the product, whatever product it is, people who will market, retail, and sell to the final consumer. There's an entire value chain. And the major reason why you should identify that value chain is because you will be able to identify who your target market is. A lot of times, people in the fashion industry, especially lawyers, would think that if you say you're a fashion lawyer, your target market is just fashion designers. But no, you are playing in a space filled with a lot of key players. And I'll tell you that in my practice, I have fashion designers, of course, as clients, but I will tell you that they are fashion professionals, fashion companies, fashion technology companies that relate to fashion, but they don't have, their work does not have to do with apparels. It can be with makeup, it can be beauty products, it can be shoes, it can be things that are related to the fashion industry, accessories, jewelries, but not necessarily apparels. That's the point. So when you're able to identify key players in the fashion business, you would know who your target market is. You would know who you should be targeting your services towards, basically. So what is fashion law, right? So fashion law is any law that has to do with the key players of the fashion industry, any law that affects the ecosystem of the fashion industry. So like I said, there is the past where people are farming and they're producing cotton, they're producing raw materials that companies would use to produce end products. Those people are also in the fashion business ecosystem, and you would find yourself providing legal services to those people. It doesn't stop it from being fashion law. So fashion law applies to every legal issue that would impact the fashion industry, from the manufacturing, producing, creating, to when this product finally reaches the consumer. So I like to talk about fashion law myths, right? So a lot of times people would say that fashion law is intellectual property. Why that is not far from the truth. I mean, intellectual property is the foundation of the fashion industry. There is more to the fashion industry than just intellectual property. You really have to understand the business of fashion. Like she mentioned when she, like Deborah mentioned when she was rounding up her presentation, when she mentioned the issue of sustainability. Sustainability is one of the biggest issues that affects the fashion industry, because the fashion industry is actually the second, if not the first, most polluting industry in the world. So right now, a lot of countries are enacting laws to reduce production of, companies. Those are areas of laws that has to do with environmental issues and the like. So when people talk about, I'm doing IP and then I can focus on fashion, it makes me laugh, because sometimes I just realize that the clients that I deal with, why IP might be a consideration, they have other considerations too. There's also the issue of greenwashing, for instance, which of course I believe is very, very prevalent in the beauty industry in Nigeria, but nobody talks about it because, of course, people do not have knowledge of it. For instance, you see that beauty products, people would say what to call their brand, natural hair gel or natural lipstick. They just put some words that connote that these brands are sourced from natural products. A lot of brands do it. I think there's currently an issue with people calling out a particular beauty company for saying that they have their product is actually sourced naturally, but they have chemicals in it. That's called greenwashing. You trying to position your brand like you source your materials from natural products, you are eco-friendly, you are environmental friendly, when in fact you are not anything close to that. It might not necessarily be in the content of your product. It might be the name that you call your products. Like I said, sometimes people would call their brands natural hair girl or black girl, skin girl, clean, but they don't know the implication of that. But that's called, when you name your brand in that particular light, it's called you making a green claim. So that's where greenwashing comes in. So it's under the fashion industry, but a lot of times people do not pay attention to it. Of course, that's because our industry is not at the point where they know. I don't want to say that it's not the point where they do this, but they do it. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the knowledge. And a lot of lawyers do not also know this, right? So that's why sometimes people just think fashion law is all about intellectual property. Of course, that's the currency that is exchanged. That is the foundation of the businesses that are set up in the fashion space. But it is way more than that, right? So there's the myth that fashion law is about business of fashion. Like I mentioned before, there are many other businesses that happen in the fashion industry, but of course, fashion is just the word that serves as the umbrella. For instance, there is influencer marketing, there's advertisement compliance, right, that happens in the fashion industry. It's an area of the fashion business that is big. But a lot of times, because I have clients that will come and meet me and say, this is what they want to advertise. And I'm looking at the current act, I'm looking at certain ethical issues. And I'm like, you can't proceed with this marketing campaign because it is against some ethical standards, against transparency, it's against some principles that may not necessarily be laws, but, would push potential investors away. So there are areas of the fashion business that people have to pay attention to more than just apparels. This is where, like I said, if you're a lawyer in the fashion space, you have to be an idealist. I like to blame, and a lot of times people like to blame the fashion industry laws, that there are no laws in the industry. That is why we do not, that's why people are focused on the areas they're focused on. However, I feel like it is also lack of creativity on the part of Africans or Nigerians in the fashion industry, right? Most people are not thinking, they're not thinking in the area of, they're not thinking more than just apparels, right? Most fashion brands are they're still family oriented, they're still sole proprietorship, one-man business. They're not thinking global. I know that there's the force saying that Africa, Nigeria is the next big thing in the fashion space, but I think that we are far from that, because all of our creativity just starts from, I make this clothes and I post it on social media, somebody buys it, and that's the fashion industry. But there's more to it, right? How many fashion brands, make bags from scratch? I mean, they create their leather, they source their leather, they do everything from that. But there are a lot of people doing it now. But I mean, it's not compared to the number of consuming population that we have. So there's a lot of areas to the fashion business more than just apparels, right? So yeah, that's like some misconception. There are many other misconceptions about fashion law, but those are like the basic ones. So I have already mentioned the various stakeholders that we have. And I mentioned that if you would have your practice here, you have to identify all of these people in order to be able to position yourself to get them. Because a lot of times people would say, oh, there are no clients in the fashion industry. How do fashion lawyers make money? I would say that my practice is 60% on the fashion industry. And that's because I have identified who my target market is, right? So there are fashion technology companies coming up right now in Nigeria, and nobody's really talking about them. But there are a lot of people building apps and applications for the fashion industry. And that's where startup law comes in. That's where corporate law comes in. That's where investment law comes in. You have to look at your stakeholders, like I said, to be able to identify distance. There's also laws that are concerned with fashion industry. I'm trying to run because, we've taken a lot of time. So yes, there are laws that are concerned with the fashion industry. I know Deborah mentioned a lot of them. She mentioned a lot, but I'll mention some of them that, probably did not come up. That's data protection. So I have clients that, like I said, they built fashion technology that helps fashion designers to, market their product better. Some of them have incorporated artificial intelligence in their software, where they study the buying habits of fashion consumers, and they are able to market or say that, oh, this is what this particular person likes. So they are able to tailor and market to this particular consumer based on the data they've gathered, right? So I realized that there's an issue of data protection, data ownership, right? Who owns the data? I know that in the European Union, which of course I have knowledge about, is I know that when you use a particular fashion brand to market to a consumer, right, the GDPR says that the brand is the owner of the data that you are generating, since you're using them as pointer. I'm not clear on that, but yeah, that's the position of the law. Or data protection. My point is data protection is a major aspect of the fashion industry, because that is what that's what a lot of brands use to market to people. And of course, there's the law of them being transparent, them being getting the consent of these consumers, consumers also understanding what they're getting into when they sign up on your platform. So there are a lot of platforms that are coming up right now to sell fashion products that connects the consumer to the designer and the fashion company selling the product. So you have to pay attention to fashion protection laws in Nigeria. I know definitely that there's a new act on that regard, but I know that also applies to the fashion industry. There's also environmental sustainability regulations and laws. You have to pay attention to that because it's a major aspect of the fashion industry. She also mentioned employment laws, consumer protection laws. I know you've heard about there's this concept, especially prevalent in the fashion industry, what I ordered versus what I got. That's also consumer protection, right? So I'm ordering something online. Am I getting it? Am I getting it in the exact quality that I think that it is? Is the consumer, sorry, is the fashion brand disclosing appropriately what they are selling to me? So that's where consumer protection also comes in. So those are the laws that, this is not exhaustive. Of course, there are many other laws that comes, into consideration, but these are like the major laws you'll be dealing with, especially when you would be working with fashion companies and fashion brands. I've mentioned this before, areas of services that you would be providing legal services to your consumer. That is. I look at it and I feel like one major aspect is contract drafting. If you would play in this particular space, you would draft contract that you probably have never heard of before. Although once you get used to it, you would know that these contracts are pretty much the same thing, just that the principles or some clauses have to be excluded and some has to be included. So there are NDAs that you have to disclose. For instance, in a design process, right? Once I have generated my tech pack, that's like the technical pack, where I have stated this is my design, this is the material that is going to be sourced, and I'm about to send it to the manufacturers, right? Before giving access to the tech pack to the manufacturing company, you have to send your NDA because you are sending your intellectual property, everything that your team has developed, the entire design process. So an NDA has to come in before you actually send the design, and they tell you, oh, we can do this, we can do that. You guys have your back and forth. And then we finalize on what they'll be producing with you before you now finally send your manufacturing agreement. So NDAs are very important because no business should release their business operations secrets, their intellectual property without necessarily protecting themselves. So NDAs are very important. Merchandising contracts, franchising, distribution, those things are very, very important. However, you rarely see them happen in the fashion industry, especially in Nigeria. But then I project that it will be happening soon enough because a lot of people are seeing these things, right? A lot of brands do not understand. So let me go back. So a lot of brands register trademark, but they do not understand why they are registering trademark. They know they're trying to protect and stop infringer, but they do not know how to exploit it to the fullest. That's my point. So you would see that a brand that makes apparel, very good brand, people know them around Lagos, Nigeria, Africa, they have very good brand positioning and perception. However, they want to move into making shoes. And of course, they do not have the skill set for that. That is where licensing comes in, right? I'm going to license my trademark to a particular shoe manufacturers, right? So they would use my trademark to manufacture shoes. Although I have to pay attention to quality assurances, the things that, quality assurances, like the level of quality that, they'll be producing. So a lot of brands do not necessarily take advantage of these things, although we see it coming in in few years, because a lot of brands are stepping up to that particular direction, knowing that they want to, expand to various segments of the fashion industry. So licensing comes in there. Also, franchising also is a major part, although we really don't see it happen because, like Debbie mentioned, there's a lot of regulations as to, so I want to come and replicate my business in Nigeria and the laws are not favorable. They're telling me I have to produce in Nigeria. And we know that production in Nigeria is very expensive, very high. It's difficult to have businesses do that, but I have seen it happen in the beauty industry here in Nigeria, where we have House of Tara telling people to come and buy. I know the House of Tara has that arrangement where you see House of Tara in Lagos, you see it in Abuja, you see it in different areas, right? A lot of makeup artists are just using her brand. They brought the franchise and they're using the brand across the country. I know she has that particular thing in place. So franchise can actually work. Beauty industry, it works. But for the fashion industry, I when it comes to apparels, right, a lot of fashion designers are very skeptical. And that's because we are not, I don't want to say that, I don't want to say this in a negative way, but a lot of fashion designers in Nigeria are not forward thinking. They're not thinking about how they can grow internationally, how they can take over the market. They're just thinking of, I just want to focus on my niche. That's the problem. That's why we do not have big fashion conglomerates, coming up from Africa because of that idea. But I'm hoping, or we are hopeful, that they'll be more open to all of these things. Yes, the skills you require as a lawyer, you have to have knowledge on law, of course. However, I think what is more important is you having knowledge on the industry itself. The fashion industry is very informal. The fashion industry needs help. So if you would be a fashion, I think you will see it in my other slides, if you will be a fashion lawyer, you have to have an impact mindset. And it is this impact mindset that led to us starting the Fashion Law Institute, because we realized that there's potential in the fashion industry. There's potential in the fashion industry, right? There's the African fashion industry, the Nigerian fashion industry has potential to do well. However, they need help. And to us, we picked law because that's where our skill set is, and we feel that law can be a tool to solving the problem of the fashion industry in Nigeria, right? So that's why we decided to start up the Fashion Law Institute, basically. So you have to have understanding of the fashion industry, the key players, what is happening, what issues they are facing, because you can't stand as a lawyer outside and say, well, I understand the legal issues. So once they just come to me, it's trademark. I'm going to do for them. It's design. I'm just going to be there. In fact, I'll tell you that most of the lawyers I know, when it comes to the fashion industry, right, based on their clientele, it is just register your trademark, draft this contract, register the business, and that is it. But I can tell you that the fashion industry has potential. It's a very futuristic industry, right? It has the potential to actually be bigger than what it is right now. So it is important for you to understand the emerging issues, understand the issues they are facing, so that you can, more than just being a lawyer in the fashion industry, you have to also advocate for policies. Because for me, I look at the fashion industry and I'm wondering why that we have the new Copyright Act and we still have Section 1 sub 3 saying that if a particular design is going to be replicated, it does not enjoy copyright. But if you check other senior clients where we have fashion businesses doing very, very well, that particular section doesn't exist. In fact, I think they had it before, but it no longer exists because, you are producing because most people have to use it. That defeats the entire idea of the fashion industry if you cannot replicate it for other people to use. The original idea of the fashion industry was made to measure, right? So I make haute couture for one person and that person wears it and all of that. But they've grown past that to a ready-to-wear system where everybody wants to wear a particular thing. There are limited editions, but people want to really wear it. So you're telling me that the law is saying that if I'm a fashion designer and I replicate a particular design, I'm not going to enjoy copyright protection. That particular law needs lawyers. The fashion industry needs lawyers to advocate for a rethinking of the law, and of course with evidence, right, to show that the fashion industry really needs it. So it's very important as a lawyer in the fashion space, if you want to have an impact mindset, you should be ready to look at their issues and provide solution more than just being, I'm going to provide only legal services, right? You have to have knowledge of fashion councils, you have to have knowledge of fashion shows. I'll tell you that when I first started in the fashion industry, it started from me attending fashion business conference organized by Lagos Fashion Week in 2016, and I've not missed any fashion business conference to date, anything that relates to the fashion business, because that is where I get ideas. Like when I see that you have issues, I'm looking at the laws, what can be better? How can we get better? How can we promote local content? What is the existing law and how can it be better? So that's how you become a better lawyer, really, by looking at that's why I said before that to be a lawyer in the fashion space, you have to be a realist and also be an idealist. What could you do to make it better for them? So yes, you have to have these skills, right? You have to have knowledge of supply chain issues also. Supply chain issues, I'll talk about one in the leather industry, for instance, in other clients, especially the European Union. People who produce leather goods must have a transparency certification, in the sense that you have to show how you sourced your leather. You should know that the white man is very particular about animal welfare, and it's a big thing in the fashion industry. In fact, that is why people don't wear fur jackets and feathers anymore internationally, because they believe that you have to protect the environment, you have to protect animals, right? But in Nigeria, we are still eating animals, we're still, using our leather to produce bags and all those things. However, if you want to export those things to the international market, they have to tell you, produce a certificate showing a transparency of your supply chain. How did you source your product before you finally made this particular product, right? So it's very important, because I know that the leather industry in Nigeria is also very booming. I mean, if you attend the leather fair, you would see that a lot of leather brands are coming up. However, that transparency requirement exists in the international market, which of course might be an hindrance to leather goods going internationally from Nigeria or Africa. So you have to be, very present. You have to have knowledge of all of this things, very present in the industry before you can, with that, you probably be a better fashion lawyer. So yes, additional skills, right? Like I said, you have to network, attend events. There are a lot of events relating to the fashion industry, more than just fashion weeks and fashion shows. I know very well now that there are a lot of master classes that they are putting together for fashion businesses, fashion lawyers. I know for one that I have pioneered several conferences on the intersection of law and business also. So try to attend these events, right, to hear, because I know they talk about a lot of issues that relates to the fashion industry. There are also judicial pronouncements. I know the fashion law is an international publication, but they talk about a lot of judicial pronouncements on the area of fashion businesses. There are case laws, brands, laws, just be abreast generally with everything that has to do with the fashion industry. There are also specialized courses, right? When I first started, although I started as a fashion designer before I moved to study law and all those things. However, I understood the place of taking courses, right? Because to be honest, there are lawyers, right? There are law firms that, practice in this particular area. There are law firms who do legal work for creatives, entertainers, and all of that. However, lawyers do not have a holistic idea of the fashion business. They do not go in depth into the business or whatever. And for me, for you to be a professional in a particular field, is that you have the idea of fashion business. You understand the idea of the business that works, because that's where you are able to relate with your clients on a particular level, especially when I know for a fact that fashion businesses would need in-house lawyers, not just external counsels. If they can have in-house lawyers, it means that you understand the business or the operations of the fashion business as a way, because you would not only be acting in the capacity of a lawyer, but you will be acting in the capacity of an administrator. Sometimes when you are acting as an in-house counsel, it's like a role that you can't separate, because everybody is looking to you to direct, especially in Nigeria where they don't separate roles. They are looking to you to say, oh, you're going to lead us in this direction, because you know it. And like I said, the fashion industry is very informal. A lot of times they do not have the knowledge. So they are always looking to lawyers to give. So you really have to understand the fashion business. So courses on fashion business, courses in fashion business administration. I'm not saying you should take that, but if you see all these master classes, try to attend to, make, your knowledge broader on fashion issues. So I'm sure that, like, with all of these things, you would do better, combined with everything that the laws that Debbie mentioned earlier. I'm sure that you would do better as a fashion lawyer if you choose to specialize in this particular field. And yeah, I said, to be a fashion lawyer, you have to have an impact mindset and you have to be selfless, because personally, I know that the market is not as competitive as, you have oil and gas businesses, you have other industries working, right? So when I first started, it was my law firm was going to focus on providing legal services for the fashion industry. However, I realized that one of the jobs we had to do was fashion education. We need to educate. We spent more time educating our clients on their legal needs and the legal issues. So it is very important, and to take you being selfless, right? So we have a lot of pro bono clinics. So you have to, like I said, have an impact mindset. You have to be selfless. You have to go an extra mile. So if other lawyers are doing pro bono in human rights and all those other, areas, you should be looking at the fashion industry. They also need help. Like I said before, you have to be selfless to, play in this particular field. Yes, so if you want more knowledge on, deep fashion law issues, because we are going to be diving into that. I mean, in the coming years, fashion law institutes have like a particular course coming up, fashion law. If you're interested, you can, hop on the course. And that's pretty much everything on what I have to say. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and all of that, and I'll be happy to respond. So
Thank you very
that's
much.
the end of my
Thank you very
presentation.
much. Thank you very much, Ms. Bernice. Thank you very much, Ms. Deborah. We've really learned a lot. I encourage everyone on the call to go back on YouTube to watch a recap. Me, I couldn't get everything as our mentors were talking, but this kind of classes, I'll go back to YouTube and be listening to it. And even when our mentors are like talking sharp, sharp, I'll be like, I'll reduce the speed so that I'll hear everything and I'll take down everything. So we encourage everyone, even those that are absent, go back on YouTube. All our contents are there, all our classes are there. So you watch a recap and you really get the message our mentors are trying to pass across. Thank you very much to our both mentors. We'll be taking our mentee presentation. But before we do that, I think we are supposed to take the picture time earlier, but we can still just take that now. For those of us that are in areas where there's lights, you can just turn on your camera, smile for the camera while I'm taking the screenshots. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I can see our beautiful faces and handsome faces. Okay. I'll be taking the PowerPoint presentation from our mentee, who is the presenter for today. But before he presents, I would like to bring it to everyone's notice that today is our presenter's birthday, and we'll all be singing him happy birthday song at the countdown of 3, 3, 2, 1, go. Happy birthday to you. You can all unmute yourself while we are singing for him. Happy birthday. Okay, we are still singing. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. May the good Lord bless you. Please let's join me now. I don't have voice. My voice is cracking. May the good Lord bless you. Happy birthday to you. His name is Daniel. Daniel, you can start your presentation now. Thank you very much. Our presenter, Mr. Daniel, are you still on the call? We can't hear you. I don't know if we can all hear you, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Good evening.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Not sure. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me, please? Okay. I couldn't hear anything from anyone, so I'll just go ahead. Thank you very much for the birthday song. I really appreciate it. I'm honored. Okay, so this evening we're talking about fashion business and law, and I must thank our mentors for the beautiful job they've done explaining fashion business and law in Nigeria. I would just proceed to go through what our group has put together. So the fashion industry in Nigeria has experienced significant growth over the past few decades. It has become one of the most vibrant and influential sectors in the country, in Nigeria's economy. Our nation's cultural heritage and the creative prowess of our designers have contributed to the development of, our fashion identity, which is now celebrated both internationally and locally. The fashion business in Nigeria, encompasses various aspects, including design, manufacturing, retail, distribution of clothing, wear, footwear, accessories, and textiles. The fashion industry is characterized by a mix of established fashion houses, emerging designers, and in a thriving informal sector. There are lots of fashion halls in major cities like Lagos and Abuja, but there are also other regions that actively contribute to the fashion industry's growth. And the rise of social media and e-commerce has further facilitated the accessibility and visibility of fashion brands globally. Fashion laws, as an area of legal practice, focuses on addressing the specific legal needs of the fashion industry. In Nigeria, with the growth of fashion business, there's also the need for legal frameworks to protect the rights of designers, manufacturers, and other stakeholders in the industry. Going forward, we will quickly discuss intellectual property rights in the fashion industry. IP rights, play a critical role in protecting the creativity, innovation, and financial investments of designers, manufacturers, and other stakeholders in the industry. So these IP rights provide legal protection for original designs, brand names, logos, and other creative that define the fashion brand's identity. The main types of intellectual property rights relevant to the fashion industry are trademarks, copyrights, and design patents. So quickly, we'll discuss each one of them. Trademarks are symbols, names, logos, or slogans that distinguish the goods or services of one company from those of others. In the fashion industry, trademarks are essential for establishing brand identity and recognition. So there's no one who will see an Adidas or Nike product and not recognize it. That's what the logo and the slogans. So also designers and fashion brands usually advise to seek trademark registration logos and unique symbols just to prevent other people from using similar marks that might cause confusion among consumers. A registered trademark gives the owner the right to take legal action against infringement. Next is copyright. So copyrights protect original creative works such as fashion designs, sketches, patterns, and prints. In the fashion industry, copyrights are very crucial for safeguarding unique and original aspects of a design. However, it's important for us to note that copyrights do not protect functional aspects of clothing, like garment shape or general style. So fashion designers can register their copyrights with the appropriate authorities to secure exclusive rights to the original designs, but not the functional aspects like shape or style. So the essence of registering the copyright is just to prevent unauthorized copying or reproduction. Quickly, we also move to the design patents. So patents protect the unique and non-functional ethical aspects of your products, including fashion and clothing accessories. So the design patents can be obtained for novel and ornamental designs that are not obvious to others in the industry. So by obtaining a design patent, a fashion designer can prevent competitors from producing or selling products with a substantially similar appearance. Since we have moving on, we have discussed intellectual property rights in the fashion industry. We shall quickly move on to licensing and franchising. Now, licensing and franchising are two common business models used in the fashion industry to expand brand reach, enter new markets, and capitalize on the popularity and recognition of an established fashion brand. Like our two mentors have highlighted earlier on, this model involves granting permission to third parties to use the brand, trademark, and business concepts. But there are still differences between licensing and franchising. So licensing is a business arrangement where a fashion brand, which is known as the licensor, grants another company, the licensee, the right to use his brand name, trademark, design, or other intellectual property for the production and distribution of specific products. So the licensee pays royalties or licensing fees to the licensor in exchange for the right to use that brand. In the context of the fashion industry, licensing can involve various product categories, such as clothing, accessories, footwear, fragrances, and even more. So, for example, a high-end fashion brand can license its name to a mass market retailer to produce and sell a more affordable line of clothing using that brand's name and trademark. Now, the benefit of licensing in fashion is that it helps fashion brands to create new markets through collaboration with companies that have established distribution networks. It also helps fashion brands to enter different product categories without the need for an in-house manufacturing and expertise. Furthermore, licensing provides a source of passive income through licensing fees and royalties. Now, in contradiction, franchising is a business model in which the fashion brand, which is known as the franchisor, grants a third party, the franchisee, the right to operate a business using the franchisor's business model, brand, and intellectual property. So the franchisee pays an initial franchise fee and ongoing royalties to the franchisor for the right to use the brand and receive ongoing support and training. Now, in the fashion industry, franchising is very common. It's commonly used in retail businesses, such as fashion boutiques and stores. A fashion brand with a very successful business model can choose to expand its retail presence by offering franchises to entrepreneurs who want to operate their stores under the brand's name and follow its established business practices. Now, the benefit of using franchising in fashion is that it helps fashion brands to grow quickly without the need for a significant capital investment. So they don't need to have too much capital on hand, to establish their businesses in new retail locations. It also helps bring local knowledge and expertise, which is very valuable in adapting the brand to specific needs and preferences for the target market. Finally, franchises help to manage day-to-day operations, allowing the franchisor to focus on product development and brand management. In that way, their responsibilities are shared. While the franchisee focuses on managing the day-to-day operations, the franchisor focuses on ensuring that they further develop the product and manage the brand. Moving on, let's discuss financing in the fashion industry. Financing of the fashion industry is an essential aspect that impacts the growth, development, and sustainability of fashion businesses in the country. So, like many other countries, fashion industry in Nigeria requires adequate financial support to fund various stages of the financial business, including design, production, marketing, and distribution. So let's quickly discuss some common sources of financing for the fashion industry in Nigeria. Number one is personal savings. So many fashion entrepreneurs in Nigeria start their businesses using their personal savings. This initial capital may be used to develop a collection, create prototypes, and set up a small retail outlet or online store. Another source of financing is bank loans. So fashion entrepreneurs often seek financing from commercial banks to support their business operations. Banks offer different types of loans, including working capital loans, equipment financing, and trade financing to assist fashion businesses in Nigeria. Another source is angel investors and venture capital. Some fashion startups seek funding from angel investors or venture capital. These investors, they provide capital in exchange for equity in the business, allowing the fashion business to scale up and expand its operation. Government also grants support to fashion businesses. They may offer grants, subsidies, or incentives to support the growth of the fashion industry. So these grants may be targeted at promoting local talent, it might be for encouraging export, or it could even be for enhancing the industry's competitiveness. Then crowdfunding is another way by which businesses can finance their fashion businesses can finance their business. So crowdfunding platforms have become very popular in recent years. We talk of I'm trying to remember GoFundMe now, for instance. They help designers to showcase their collections and innovative ideas, and then attract financial support from individuals who are interested in their work. So crowdfunding is one surefire way of financing for fashion businesses. The partnership and collaborations with established brands or retailers can provide financial and marketing support for emerging and new fashion designers and brands. Another way to finance fashion business in Nigeria is fashion incubators and accelerators. So these fashion incubation and accelerators, they provide a combination of funding, mentorship, and resources to support early stage entrepreneurs and fashion startups in Nigeria. Finally, personal networks and family support. Fashion entrepreneurs almost always often rely on their family and friends for financial support during the early stages of their businesses. So for any new business, any new entrepreneur going into fashion business, they have to look at the availability and sustainability of all of these financing options, and then decide what they want depending on the scale, size, and stage of their fashion business. Additionally, fashion entrepreneurs also must ensure that they properly manage their finances and plan to use their funds effectively so as to grow their businesses in the fashion industry. Now, let's discuss distribution in the fashion industry. Distribution refers to the process of getting fashion fashion products from manufacturers or designers to consumers. So it involves movement and management of goods through various channels to reach the end users. They will have the direct channel, indirect channel, and I would quickly run through some other ones. Wholesale distribution, for instance, is a traditional method used by fashion brands to reach retailers. So in this sort of model, brands sell their products in bulk to retailers at discounted prices, and the retailers in return sell the products to consumers at retail prices. So wholesale distribution is common for established brands that produce larger quantities of products and have a network of retail partners. Retail distribution is another type. So it involves selling fashion products directly to the consumer through physical stores or online platforms. Fashion brands may establish their retail stores, flagship stores, or concept stores to showcase their collections and provide a direct shopping experience to consumers. Additionally, many fashion brands have online stores that allow consumers to shop from anywhere. So these are what we call the e-commerce and online retail. With the rise of internet and e-commerce in the world and in Nigeria especially, online retail has become a significant contribution channel in the fashion industry. So fashion brands and retailers can operate their online stores, allowing their customers to shop conveniently from their mobile devices. E-commerce platforms and marketplaces offer opportunities for fashion brands to reach a wider audience and expand their market presence. Also, fashion brands may work with distributors or agents who act as intermediaries between the brands and retailers. So these distributors and agents help in marketing, sales, and logistics, facilitating the distribution of products to various retail outlets. Then, as we mentioned earlier, licensing and franchising can also serve as distribution strategies. So fashion brands can license their name and designs to third-party manufacturers or franchise their retail operations to expand their reach into international distribution. Is another form of distribution in the fashion industry. So this one involves global fashion brands, collaborating with local fashion businesses. So it involves partnerships with international retailers, distributors, and agents to make products available in different countries. Now let's quickly move on to infringement and enforcement. So in the fashion industry, infringement of intellectual property is a significant concern for designers and brands. Fashion businesses invest considerable time, effort, and resources in creating unique designs, brand identities, and trademarks. So infringement occurs when unauthorized parties copy, imitate, or use these protected elements without permission, leading to potential financial losses, damage to reputation, and dilution of the brand's distinctiveness. So there are different forms of infringement in the fashion industry. We have counterfeiting, we have copying designs, we have trademark infringement, we have trade dress infringement, we have online infringement. So counterfeiting involves the production and sale of fake or imitation products bearing the fashion brand's trademark, design, and logo. So it's now that counterfeiting misleads consumers into believing they are purchasing authentic goods, meanwhile they are not. Then unauthorized reproduction or imitation of fashion design is also another infringement of fashion of IP rights in the fashion industry. Then trademark infringement involves the unauthorized use of a brand's name, logo, or symbol on products or promotional materials. Finally, online infringement occurs when the rights of these fashion businesses are infringed through online platforms such as e-commerce websites, social media, and digital marketplaces. Now, how do fashion businesses enforce their IP rights? Number one way they do that is by monitoring and detection. So regularly they monitor the market and online platforms for potential infringements, and when they identify it, they reach out to such infringer to take it off. Another way is they issue cease and desist letters to infringing parties, demanding that they stop infringing on their rights, and if they do not, rather they would seek protection. Another compensation, rather. Another way is filing lawsuits against the infringers in law courts. So this way, this legal action can take the forms of injunctions, damages, accounting for profits through profits earned through infringement. Finally, because of our time, I would only explain online takedown is another method. So fashion businesses can request that these online platforms remove the infringing content through takedown notices and reporting tools. Other forms of enforcement include registering the IP rights with custom authorities to prevent counterfeit goods from entering the country, enforcing IP rights in international jurisdictions where the infringing activities are occurring, and finally entering into licensing agreements with authorized manufacturers or distributors to control and regulate the use of IP. Now let's discuss contracts in fashion business and law. So contracts play a crucial role in any aspect of life, and especially very much in the fashion business. They formalize agreements, establish legal obligations between parties, and the fashion contracts cover a wide range of arrangements, some from design to manufacturing to distribution to licensing. Some common contracts in fashion business include manufacturing contracts, licensing agreements, distribution contracts, retail lease agreements, endorsements and sponsorship contracts, employment contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and collaboration agreements. So we'll discuss just about 5 of them because of our time. So licensing agreements, as we discussed earlier on, they involve granting permission to third parties to use the branding, trademarks, or design of a fashion brand in exchange for licensing fees or royalties. Also, licensing agreements are prevalent in the fashion industry because they allow brands to expand their reach and enter new markets without directly managing the production and distribution of the products. Also, then retail lease agreements help fashion brands that operate physical retail stores. So this contract establishes the terms and conditions for renting commercial stores spaces. They involve the rent, lease duration, responsibilities for maintenance, repairs, and any restrictions on the use of the premises. Then endorsement and sponsorship contracts involve contracts that fashion businesses get into with celebrities, influencers, and public figures. So these contracts outline the obligations of the parties, including the scope of the endorsements, the compensation, the requirements for using the brand products, and for promoting the brand. Employment contracts, is one contract that is virtually used in every sphere. So it specifies the terms and conditions of employment, also including the job responsibilities, salary benefits, working hours, and termination procedure. Now, non-disclosure agreement, this is a very important agreement in the fashion industry. So it helps protect confidential information. Now, fashion business involves very confidential information, including the fashion, the design things, and all of that. So non-disclosure agreements help fashion businesses to protect their designs. So it's common when discussing the proprietary rights and manufacturing processes, the marketing strategy, or business plans with their potential partners or investors. Finally, collaboration agreements are contracts used when 2 or more fashion or products. So this contract define the rules, responsibilities, and profit sharing arrangements between the collaborators. Now, in conclusion, fashion business and law are intricately connected with legal principles that play a vital role in shaping the fashion industry's operations works. So we've discussed in this presentation trade intellectual property rights, including trademarks, copyright, and design patents. We've discussed the foundation of protecting the unique designs. We've discussed securing and enforcing these rights, that's being crucial for safeguarding creativity, preventing infringements, and maintaining brand identity. We've also discussed the contracts in the fashion industry that underpin essential relationships, transactions, and collaborations between various stakeholders. So from licensing agreements to franchising agreements to supply chain contracts and retail agreements, all of these agreements help foster long-term partnerships and ensure fair dealings. So the distribution I'm also discussed the distribution of fashion products, which we mentioned that it's a strategic aspect that shapes a brand's accessibility and market reach. So whether it's through wholesale or retail or e-commerce or franchising, the right distribution channels can expand the brand's influence, as we have discussed before, and can also cater to the consumer preferences, diverse as they might be. We discussed the challenges in fashion industry, which are counterfeiting, piracy, and rapidly evolving consumer trends, which require constant vigilance and proactive legal strategies. So, fashion businesses must stay informed about the changes in law and regulations so as to maintain compliance and protect their interests. Now, fashion law practitioners and enthusiasts play a very essential role in guiding fashion entrepreneurs through legal complexities. They help advise on IP protection, contract negotiation, dispute resolution, and compliance matters. So their expertise ensures that fashion businesses can focus on their creative pursuits while navigating legal skills effectively. In conclusion, the fashion industry is an exciting and vibrant domain that intertwines creativity and commerce with legal principles. A harmonious balance between the innovation and legal protection is essential for fashion businesses to thrive, meet consumer demands, and leave a lasting mark in the dynamic world of fashion. So we've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our birthday boy, for that very in-depth presentation. The research was very deep. Kudos to all the team members, from the group leader to the compiler, to the researchers, and also our birthday boy, the presenter. Thank you very much. We've come to the question and answer session. I hope we have our both mentors with us. I encourage everyone to put up their hand, like raise your hand on the top. So I'll call on you to ask your question, the live questions. We already have some questions that were sent during your start, so I'll be sending the question on the chat box. But before we start the question and answer session, I'll give Deborah just 5 minutes or 3 minutes to comment on the presentation. If there's any correction, any place you think that you guys didn't really get the research for it, so you can just chip in and then you can go forward.
Hi, Daniel, well done on the presentation. I think it was well put together. I think that with the presentations that myself and Bernit have made, any gaps there, you'll be able to fill it up by the time you have access to them. But I think it was a good presentation overall.
All right, thank you very much. So, Bernit, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I second everything that Debbie said. It was a very robust presentation, and I think if you put everything together, you would have like a very holistic understanding of the topics. Really.
Okay. So from the questions that were sent, I can see that some of the questions have been answered during our mentor's presentation. I'll just still ask them for you, just to shed more light on it. The first question is for Ms. Deborah. What are some of the key legal considerations that fashion businesses should be aware of when it comes to intellectual property protection, such as trademark and copyrights? Maybe you already talked about it in your presentation.
Sorry, power just went out where I am. What are the key legal considerations?
Okay.
Okay. This question has already been answered during my presentation. When it comes to intellectual property protection, I think it's already been answered. I talked about trademarks being the major IP form that applies to fashion brands. Copyright, although not area, and industrial marks. So I think that's been answered also. In fact, I think a number of these questions have
already been
answered in
answered,
both
yes.
presentations.
Yes, I also noticed that. Let me just see if I can add some of them that we answered. How about the question number? Okay, question number 3. Let me ask question number 3.
Daniel, do you want to mute your microphone?
Question number 3. I'll be asking Ms. Benny's question number 3, which says, can you provide insight into the international trade and customs regulations and fashion company should navigate when dealing with global sourcing and distribution? I think our both mentors can take that question.
Yeah. So I touched on transparency of supply chain. Earlier I mentioned that if a designer or fashion company is thinking of taking their goods or exporting their goods, those are like questions that the brands have to answer, because a lot of a lot of international consumers are very conscious of what they are buying. They are very, like I said, they have this concern. So, okay, I would explain. I'm currently in Milan, right? And I realized that the perception of how they buy is different from Nigeria. For instance, they are concerned about what it took you to make a product. What is your product eco-friendly? Is your product very environmental conscious? Is your product very how are you concerned about people, for instance? Like Debbie mentioned before, she talked about who are the people who produce your goods. You'll be surprised to know that people think that in Nigeria we don't have child labor. We actually do. We have a lot. If you go to Yaba Market, it's a very popular production hub. It's called Kitchen, right? They produce like 24 hours a day, constantly running. You will see people who are below 18 doing a lot of work when it comes to production of fashion items. If you go there at 3 a.m., you would see young people there, you would see designers queuing, you would see people there wanting to produce whatever. So in this area, right, internationally, they're very conscious of who your labor force is. How did you get your labor? Did you go to Nigeria? Did you go to third world countries to look for people that are below 18 because you're looking for cheaper labor? Right? What are the benefits that you give them as workers, right? Because a lot of times when you want to produce, people just get contractors to do their work. There is no healthcare benefits. There is no safety in the workplace. There is no pension. There is nothing. So they are asking themselves, if I buy this product, what effect does it have on the society, really? So they are very conscious of that particular fact, right? There is also the attention to immigration law, export laws, import laws. In Africa, we do not have a unified system. I mean, I know that the ASTA, that's like the treaty is actually trying to unify trade in Africa. However, the implementation is still like, in doubt, or still in the works. So like you have to pay attention to all of the tariffs, the laws in different countries, what you can export there, what your product contains, right? So what are the laws or the international laws? What do they provide? So I think that those are the things that you have to consider. You have to consider transparency, sustainability, environmental issues, like I said, then export laws, international trade regulations, immigration laws, the tariffs and the taxes you're supposed to pay on your goods and those things like that. Yeah. So I think you're supposed to consider, really.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bernice. I'll be giving the floor to Deborah to maybe contribute to that.
I think that Bernice has really covered the ground on that. And when you talked about the sustainability standards a lot of countries have, I just remember that I'm not sure if it's with fashion or with food, but some companies actually mark their products cruelty-free. And it's like, if you're marking a meat product cruelty-free, like what does that, does it mean? It means different things in different countries. For instance, in America, I mean, I know that a lot of these things are not talked about as much in Nigeria, but they're talked about elsewhere. For instance, in America, people talk about things like, lab-grown chicken, and, you breed the chicken so big that it sounds ridiculous only like to a Nigerian ear, but it's actually not, and it does matter. People mark their products cruelty-free. Even on some clothing items, the company tries to do, this product was not, people were not exploited using exploitation-free things like that. So that ties into sustainability. And on international trade and customs regulation, when it comes to global distribution, of course, you have to, if you're importing it or exporting it, you have to pay attention to the immigration laws of that country. Every country has, Nigeria has a number of immigration regulations that many people don't actually know. In fact, I encourage you, since we're all young lawyers, after this call, go and look up the 2 prohibition lists. You'll be very surprised by what you find on some of them. Look up the Nigerian Customs Service import prohibition list and the FCCPC's absolutely prohibited products list. Second-hand clothes are prohibited from being imported into Nigeria. How old were you when you found that out? So the second-hand clothes that are sold, how did they get into Nigeria? Don't ask me. But imagine being a fashion brand owner and not knowing something like that, or being a lawyer to a fashion brand owner and not knowing something like that. So it just shows you that there's so many things that you take into consideration. So I just wanted to add that to what Bernice already said.
Yeah, that second-hand clothing. I remember when I found, because I was doing a bit of, okay, so we are currently working on a white paper report on the state of fashion law in Africa, and we are looking at all of the policies that exist. And I remember when we found out that there is actually a policy on second-hand clothing being prohibited. And we made a post on it, and a lot of people said no. But I'm like, and you would see that a lot, because I know if you check the fashion industry, a lot of people advocate for second-hand clothing because they believe that it solves the problem of sustainability. However, it really doesn't for us, because if you look at it in the Nigerian scheme of things, we're not wearing second-hand clothing of our parents. We're not wearing second-hand clothing of our family members. We're wearing second-hand clothing of the foreigners that overproduce and sent it to our country. You get it? So when I see people advocating that second-hand clothing is a thing, I feel like if we're wearing second-hand clothing of all of us who were trying to recycle within ourselves, is a different thing. That means we have production capacity and we're producing, we're trying to control. But we are managing the overproduction of other industries so we're not even producing at all. We have not even solved the problem of production. We are now still managing overproduction from other countries. And that's where the principle of waste colonialism comes in, because there's also an idea that the white people colonized us and they are now pushing their stuff to us. And it's also a principle I know in the fashion industry that people are talking about. And it's a major issue that you also have to be aware of if you would play in this space, because there are people who start their brand off from selling second-hand clothing in Nigeria because they want to solve sustainability issue. Of course, that's illegal because we have laws prohibiting that. So yeah. And there's also a question on influencer marketing, right? So I would just keep in that there is also the rise of virtual influencers in Nigeria. I know for a fact that I have one or two clients that have built in AIs, that's as sort of influencers, right? They are popular. I think there's one called Mutupe or something like that. There's another one, Chola. They have like names, Nigerian names. So they are influencers, virtual AI influencers. And that's something of, I don't want to say of the future because it's coming now. It's something now. I know companies that are building AIs for, advertisement purposes. So if you would have or have to represent people like that, you have to be looking at the implication of using AI for advertisement. So for instance, a company develops a product, an AI to advertise, right? To influence a particular product. You have to disclose that this particular person that is, advertising is an influencer. Because sometimes if you look at an AI, you probably would not even know that it is, because this particular one is so beautiful. It doesn't, except of course, like you're very conversant. Regular people would not know that this is not a human being because they make her wear Ankara, they make her do other things, they've given her names. So you have to disclose to people that you're contracting with and your audience that this person is AI, right? And transparency is the key to artificial intelligence. It's one of the major principles of advertisement and also artificial intelligence, that you're advertising through that particular medium is something. You should also look at the fact that AI is getting to the point where most of the work that they do is no longer programmed, right? So you can program them, but they can do more than just what they are programmed to do. There's the generative AI, right? So for instance, I'm an AI and I was told to advertise a particular dress. However, when my employer, or the person who invented me puts that program in me, and I decide not to advertise dress, I'm advertising other things because they say that the AI can actually think on its own. It cannot be controlled by the person who programmed it. It can do more than that. So there's a consideration of liability. Who bears the liability of when the AI acts on its own volition? So I know there's like issues around influencer marketing, AI, using virtual influencers that we have to consider. I know that there is no law as regards artificial intelligence in Nigeria. I'm sure that we would not have any law anytime soon because we are always dragging our feet, really. But I know that in the foreign times, they are already thinking of enacting a regulation for AI. And this is where disclosure comes in. You have to disclose, you have to talk about who has the liability when an AI is in default, who bears the brunt, is it the company, all those things like that, really. So you have to consider all of those things when it comes to influencer marketing. And I also mentioned things on marketing, right? Greenwashing. So advertising campaign, there are major issues when it comes to advertising campaign. So I know that the AMCON Act talks about how that, is it the AMCON Act? Yes, talks about how that you have to use local models. That's a fashion law regulation, basically, that you have to use Black people, you have to use Nigerians to advertise your product. So if you are going through your website, because I've had to do that for clients, right, where they are selling clothes and we're looking at their platforms, we're looking at their ads, and we're saying, you have to use a Black person, you have to use a Nigerian model, you can't be using white voice, you can't be using, the voiceover cannot exactly be a foreigner, it has to be a Nigerian. It has to be sort of like localized, so that the regulators are watching, right? I don't know if you saw that they called out certain influencers, I can't remember their names right now, for violating all of these acts. And there's also the fact that they have to be approved by them before it goes out to the market. The enforceability and applicability of that is still in question, because a lot of times ads goes out without, but you have to advise your clients on those issues. Yes, and if I can remember anything, so the things you say that your brand is, be sure that they are, right? I know that we do not have any certification requirements, right? But be careful. If you're going to be looking at international markets, if you say that you are an eco-friendly brand, if you say that you source from natural products, get certifications to say that you have done clinical research and it is true. Don't just tell your people to put it out there. We are 100%. They say it. You see, we are 100% natural brand. A lot of beauty brands say it in Nigeria. How they came about that, we don't know. But you can't be hoping to break into an international market and you're making those claims, right? They're called green claims. You can't be making green claims and you don't have any certifications to back it up. You get, so those are like things you have to consider when it comes to influencer marketing and influencer marketing and collaborations and all of that.
Thank you very much to our both mentors. Very, very insightful session. Thank you very much for our mentees that stayed close to the end of the call. So with this, we come to the closing of today's session on entertainment business and law. Like Ms. Benny said earlier, if you still want to get more insights on fashion business and law, there's a masterclass coming up. I think those details are our presentation that I shared on mentees group earlier. We are waiting Ms. Deborah's presentation also. I want to be sharing that. Thank you very much, our both mentors, for staying with us today. We truly appreciate. Very special thank you from Madam Diana and thank you. Have a good night. We hope to see our both mentors in other sessions.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.